Hey, welcome along. You are with RCR Unplugged. First time ever, and I know you've been missing your RCR 360s on a Thursday night. And joining me, of course, is the fantastic host of RCR 360, Alistair Harding. Good evening, Alistair.
Good evening, Maree. This is a change, isn't it? You
I
sitting over there and
know.
me sitting over here.
I know it is a change. Well, it's actually quite nice, I think, for you, isn't it? You sort of, yeah, to steal Rachel's title, you ride shotgun with me tonight. I was saying to Alistair just as we were chatting and getting started, I rewatched Managed Out again last night with my husband, and it's just absolutely brilliant. If you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, do. We're going to talk about that a little later on the show, but it was so good. And what I was going to say, just when Sean said we needed to stop talking, we had to start, was that I love the guy who's the surveyor. You
Yeah,
know, where theory meets reality. He was fantastic.
that story to me was just that's absolute. That's the whole story in a nutshell. It's observed science. It's observed. He's watched it happen, and these people are trying to flip the whole narrative upside down and say you never saw that. It's gaslighting over a 50-year period, right?
I know. It's just, I love it when he said the beach used to come up to my gate.
Yeah. And you know what? There's another part of that story that I went and filmed further up. It's actually outside the zone, so I didn't put it in the film because it's not specifically in the Kapiti region. It's just a little bit further north. There's a shipwreck up there called the Hyderabad, and kids used to jump off it into the water back in the old days. I've seen photographs of a plane landing on the beach between the sand dunes and the shipwreck. Okay, the shipwreck was in the water. These days, if you go there, you can't see the shipwreck. There's a sign. There's like a post, a totem pole with the word Hyderabad written on it, and you can see just poking up above the sand dunes, about this far above the sand dunes, HY. You
And
can't
it's just
even.
completely engulfed.
You can't see the shipwreck anymore.
Wow.
And where you go onto the beach there, you come out onto the beach. There's a surf club. They just knocked down the old surf club because it's too far away from the sea, and they had to build a new surf club about 100 meters further, closer to the sea.
Yeah,
It's
it's
absolutely
just
incredible.
insane. I know, it's insane. Tonight we're looking at, I mean, Alistair and I sort of went off on a tangent talking about Managed Out, but we're going to be talking about three episodes specifically because the three of them all kind of intertwine together. And they are Democracy, which was episode 1, Trust in the Media, which was episode 3, I think, and Digital Manipulation, which was 5 or 6, 5. And they all sort of work together, and there's just been so much going on. So this is what I want you guys to do for us is, have you got any burning questions about those three shows, and that you'd like to ask us, things that you saw in the shows that you have questions about, even stuff currently in our media at the moment in regards to those three topics. And what we thought we would do is that we would just whet your appetites and remind you a little bit of what happened with those three topics. And I'm Maree, with Alistair's help, learned a new skill this week, which was Maree learned how to video edited her first clip. And Alistair is, I've sent it to Alistair to play for you because I haven't quite got that driving lesson yet, but we'll get there. So this is just a montage of some of the interviews that we did from those three episodes here in season 1. Over to you, Alistair.
So this requires a longer discussion about what has been traditionally meant over the last 30, 40 years, really in the whole post-Cold War period, by the term democracy. A lot of times what they really mean is a global ruling class will decide the way the world functions for you. That is what the American neocons have always called democracy. So that's why the U.S. has been working with NATO to overturn elections and overturn governments and install a kind of a global regime of censorship. So people who favor kind of global controls are necessarily being anti-democratic, not pro-democratic. I think that's the critical thing to realize. The essence of globalism is to disenfranchise the voters, because voters only matter on a national basis, not on an international basis.
How do you describe how important freedom of speech is to democracy?
this term freedom of speech is a bit of a misnomer. It's also the freedom to learn, the
Yes.
freedom to know. And everybody has to have the right to speak in order to guarantee the freedom to know the truth. Any compromise in the freedom of speech necessarily cuts off access to knowing about reality.
I never really saw people particularly biting their tongues because it was going to cost them money until COVID, right? So, and then what happened during COVID was that all of those digital free expression people just went quiet about COVID. And they criticized a little bit the contact tracing apps and the kind of privacy implications of those at the start. But after 6 months, everyone basically, whilst, couldn't talk about, Facebook had a policy, you cannot talk about the lab leak hypothesis on our platform. All this digital censorship started happening, vaccine passports, which should have been for people talking about digital privacy and expression, like a major, massive topic to talk about, and no one talked about it. And the reason is exactly what you were saying, is that it was kind of a slow burn that I could kind of see a little bit going on, but I didn't after 15 or more years, I never actually saw them kind of use that power. And then during COVID, they did.
If you cannot literally live your life until you do as they say, that's not a nudge. Yeah, that's comply or else. That's a threat. It's many other things. So much about our behavior is automatic. And what happens is that they can influence us, but we won't know we've been influenced. And that's when it gets to that area where you would have noticed that if you'd have asked anyone before the pandemic some questions, 5 years later, they would answer from a very different position, but they wouldn't be aware that they've changed. Our beliefs drive our behavior, but also our behavior will change our beliefs. So what's happening is that we change our beliefs according to our behavior to fit into the herd, not to be thrown out, because obviously thousands of years ago, if you start acting very strange, or if you don't do what everyone else is doing, you then stick out like a sore thumb. And that's what the whole thing was doing, was basically creating these new norms. And if you didn't do that, then you were the crazy person. And via that conditioning, what they did was, well, for a start, everyone felt that they had no choice. Even the people that said no still felt that they were pressurized into what they were doing. And of course, what happens is that then if you said anything off script, we all know that what you were called.
In many respects, it's a combination of issues that coalesced with a single event. So what you've had has been the sort of polarization, if you like, of societal groups, so that you've got ideologies developing, you've got I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm never going to listen to you, and anything that you say is rubbish type of stuff. And that all started to develop around about the mid-2010s, 2015, 2016, reached its sort of high point with the first Trump victory. Then you had COVID. And that, to me, was where all of the strands came together, where there might have been a sort of disparate lack of trust or confidence in the media. COVID sort of focused it, because states wanted to get a message across, and in that respect, they wanted to control the messaging system. And in this country particularly, surprise, surprise, we had a prime minister whose degree was in what? Communication.
Mm.
And the media were brought on board, disparaged anybody who had a contrary point of view. Then, of course, you've got the Public Interest Journalism Fund, which was an absolute disaster in terms of the way that it was sold. And that only helped to enhance what everybody thought. Yeah, I think COVID was what brought it all together. And it's continued to go downhill from there, coupled with the fact that there has been a rise in alternative media, like, well, for example, like RCR, numerous outlets where people can get the information that they want to get and which they rely on, or alternatively, which they trust. So it isn't as though there's a sort of lack of trust in information systems. It's a lack of trust in some of the ways in which it's been delivered, and that in particular is mainstream media.
There's been some great questions that have come in, but first up, that little montage, Alistair, thank you for playing that. You know, it was fun making it and pulling it together because it just reminded me of how much good stuff was in those 3 opening episodes. And just, I mean, that quote from Jeffrey Tucker, freedom of speech is somewhat of a misnomer. It's the freedom to learn, the freedom to know.
Yeah,
So
and look,
powerful.
I go back to the very first episode where we played clips from Donald Trump's inauguration, right? And he was talking in that inauguration speech all about rededicating America to freedom of speech. And he signed an executive order doing exactly that a couple of days later or something. And I found it just incredible at the time because we're talking about a country that has freedom of speech in their constitution. And he had to say that. And it was because of those last 5 years, right? During COVID, where the censorship industrial complex became a thing. And now they're all trying to pretend it didn't exist, but it did. And that's what Jeffrey was talking about.
Yeah. And also Andrew Lowenthal, that's why I put that clip in there too, because he came from the side of the fence where he was working with NGOs. It was all about that freedom and free flow of information. And then all of a sudden, it was like someone had waved a wand during COVID, and the first people that would normally have jumped up and down when people's liberties and the ability to actually share information and be critical, all of a sudden it was zoom, and they said nothing.
Yeah, well, and I remember that interview really well. There was a moment there where he explained to me, or we came to the same conclusion, that they came to the point where it was lose the money, lose the funding, or go along with it, and they just decided that the money was more important. And I think that that's probably. They'd been trained to do that over a number of years, right? These are a whole lot of NGOs that are running journalism lectures and boot training camps and so on in the third world and so on, and they got drunk on the money, and they couldn't survive without it. And I think that just spread throughout the world. I mean, during COVID, I remember talking to people and they said, well, how can they get everybody talking along the same lines? Well, that's exactly how they did it. It was money. And we've started to see that now with the whole, the Doge inquiries too, haven't we?
Oh, wow. Yeah. And they're starting to now publish some of the money and savings that they've made with that. And I also think it's those layers of bureaucracy. I think it was something that I saw the other day with one of them, and there was an email chain saying in order to move a login from the middle of a page up to there, it was going to take something like 7 months. And someone from Doge went in it and did it in like 17 minutes. I mean, it's just insanity. Yeah, absolute insanity. Mike has asked, have we seen the interview with Paul and Ian Davis? That will scare the crap out of you, he reckons. It's all about the singularity. It involves the oligarchy with Elon Musk, who is in the middle of it. And I guess it was something that you brought up actually in Democracy in the first episode, Alistair, about that, your concerns, some of the concerns you had with Donald Trump and Elon Musk and that whole technocracy, with the good comes the bad.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of people bringing those problems up. I mean, there's people protesting all over the United States at the moment, but that's democracy, right? That's that's freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is about testing ideas, and if you can't bring up your misgivings, if you can't bring up the things that you see that are going wrong, then something's really going wrong, I suppose. But yeah, that's the way I see it. Yeah,
and I agree too. It's about picking out too. I think the good is actually being able to discern that you don't have to agree with absolutely everything that a single person says or does in order for you to actually follow along with that. If we actually apply that metric, we would never agree or follow or participate in anything, because I don't think there is anybody that is able to be that perfect politician, that perfect statesman, that perfect person in media. So I think it's about being able to actually discern, and actions, not words, for me, is what they're doing as opposed to what they're saying.
See, and this is another thing too that it's started to jiggle around in my head recently, and that's that the reason that we're seeing all of this is because the internet has opened up the information systems for us all, and we can all go and research here, and we can read that there, and we can view this over there. We're able to see all of these things, and the reason that this is so damned uncomfortable at the moment is because the media, with that, the media have become completely irrelevant now. We can go everywhere. Like you just mentioned that interview before with those people. I haven't seen that one yet, but I can go and have a look at it. And they've lost control. They were the gatekeepers of information. They used to be able to present everything in their own way, and they've lost control of that. So what's happened is now they're looking for a way to stay relevant. And the way that they've decided to stay relevant is to sell themselves out to the rich and powerful, basically.
Crazy. Now, Jackie's got a great question that she's just popped in the chat, and it says, do you think mainstream media will change back, or are the tutors still training the journalists in the indoctrinated fashion? It's a really good question, Jackie. And to be honest with you, they talk about the long march in the institutions. I think it's going to take a while, regardless of what institution that you're in, for things starting to shift. But here's the beautiful thing, is with the rise, I think, of alternative media out there, that there could be this, you don't need to go to these schools in order to learn the craft. I mean, journalism school and these media schools are only quite a recent construct. I know that they were just starting to come about when I, entered into the market back in the late 90s. So I think we might start seeing things going full circle. What do you reckon, Alistair?
Well, I went to one of those schools. I went to the AUT. It's now it's AUT now. In those days it was AIT, and I was in the mass communications and did the journalism degree. And I remember Richard Long coming and talking to us and so on. But it was drilled into us then about, the independence that you had to have as a journalist. It appears that's just completely gone now. I mean, journalists see themselves as activists now. There's a clip coming up that you've got coming up with Annie O'Brien talking about that, about how people just, they get into journalism seemingly to put their point of view across, not to report the news anymore. And I think that's a real shame. It's sad, but I think that's also what's killing them, and it's not going to last forever.
No, it won't. It won't. And I think why it won't last forever is because of that rise of alternative media, like Jackie said, using alternative media now, and that's where it will come from. It will be from the ground up. Now, we also had some great comments. I'm going to read a few of these from you that you sent in across the time from when things aired, and we do actually appreciate that. From the first episode on democracy, I was buzzing after watching the RCR 360 democracy debut. Jeffrey Tucker and Elizabeth Rata were so eloquent, articulate, and just plain correct in what they were saying. Love what you're doing, guys. And that was from Patrick. Elizabeth Rata was amazing. She is just such a treasure, and particularly with education. She's now building, helping build the English curriculum in schools. And when you've got people like her involved, I think there's hope.
Yeah, we got a lot of good feedback about what Elizabeth had to say on that one, didn't we? I know my mother was one of those. She called me up telling me how brilliant Elizabeth was.
Yeah, no, she was just incredible. And on Trust in the Media, from Mike, I really enjoyed your RCR 360 episode on Trust in the Media. The media reform proposals to create a regulator for all professional media are just very concerning and a direct threat to RCR as a forum for open discussion. I think the RCR community needs to push back hard against this, for example, by encouraging listeners to submit or create a template for submission. Keep up the good work, Mike. Thanks, Mike. And yeah, you're right. It's so funny with all all of these attacks to free speech. And it's like whack-a-mole in this country, isn't it? You know, just as you get one thing whacked down, something else comes up. And a little bit later, we're actually going to show a story of what can happen if you do not suppress this stuff and sort of weed it out at the root. Also, too, from the Orwell's Nightmare, which was the digital manipulation, I'm enjoying listening to your 360 program and the information you and Maree are putting out there. As you saw more and more throughout the scamdemic, manipulation played a huge part in the whole program. An indicator to where humanity in general sits on the New World Order et al. The use of program and mind manipulation is becoming more and more evident, and to those that can see it, and to those who already know. This programming was blatantly obvious, and that was something that actually David Sherry-Lambus sort of brought up. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, but it's actually seeing it that's the can be quite challenging. As you would have seen in the Beacon, lots of people came out of the woodwork and began working together. This happened all around the world. This is what happens still when people realise what is going on. And as I've said many times, it's wonderful. People are beginning to awaken. Unfortunately, it's also noticeable how people are going back to sleep, blaming, I'm just getting on with my life. Sad, really, but inevitable, as history shows us. Again, just seeing you work in this many tentacled global machination. Thank you, Lance. You know, that's interesting. Have you sort of seen evidence of that with people now that they've gotten through the pandemic and then there's sort of fatigue after the last 5 years with all of this, and they're like, oh.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I feel it myself, right? I was watching something the other day, and it was like a travel show thing, and I was thinking, man, I'd like to go back traveling again and enjoy the world again. But you can't sort of close your eyes to what's been going on, and there are much more important things to worry about, I suppose. But I also think that knowledge is power, and you can't let this stuff. We can see now so clearly how we are being manipulated, and we can see how it's being done, but we can't let that mean that we live, lives of fear. I remember the old Voices for Freedom sweatshirts we used to wear during the zombie apocalypse. It said freedom over fear on the back of those. And we have to make sure that, sure, we do know that this stuff is happening, but we can't let it destroy our lives. We've got to actually just use it to actually become more powerful.
Yeah, we do. We do. And these are actually some really good questions that are coming in from the chat, guys. It's just fantastic. One here is, how come there were never any debates about Biden's presidency during his term? Well, I mean, the answer for that really, I think, became quite obvious in the end once they did finally wheel him out for a debate, and that sparked such an incredible political chain of events. And when you think about it, that must be coming up to a year ago soon that happened. It was sort of about the middle of last year. It really was quite amazing. It took 50 odd years to train media through the university. So yes, Maree, it will take a while to get rid ourselves of these communist teachers within. Yeah, and I think it is going to take a long time, but this is where I think the alternatives come in. As David Harvey said at the end of that clip, it's the alternatives that are moving over. People are starting to sort of switch off with one and actually looking for an alternative. And I'm just scrolling. Actually, this is where Peter, 300,000 submissions were received on the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Bill. 90% were against the bill. What does 90% of New Zealanders, do they want a system where the Maree are given special privileges? Actually, I've been finding this news and how this has been reported really fascinating, because it's this whole, again, this manipulation, right? Manipulation with numbers. And you've seen that in the cycle. Overwhelmingly people were against the bill. Yet all internal polling that has been done by the likes of the ACT Party, by the ACT Party was showing, what was it? The majority of people, if this were to go to referendum, would vote against. So who do you believe, Alistair?
I look, this whole subject about the treaty principles bill, we're talking about the episodes about democracy and trust in media and digital manipulation. This story is the New Zealand story of those three stories, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about our democracy. What is a treaty? A treaty is a partnership. It's a partnership between people. That doesn't mean that one gets to talk. That doesn't mean that one gets special privileges. That means there's a partnership there. We're talking about the New Zealand culture. Culture is something which, there is no pure culture. Everything is always influenced by another culture. The Romans were influenced by the Greeks. The Japanese were influenced by the Chinese. This whole debate is seemingly all about just one so-called pure culture having the say above the other culture. It doesn't exist. We needed to have that conversation. I'm glad David Seymour did it, and we've started to talk about it. Hopefully it means that there will be a more meaningful conversation, maybe a more clear-headed conversation. But the trust in the media comes into this as well, because the media hasn't reported on this very fairly. It hasn't reported both sides. I mean, I'm sure there are arguments for both sides equally, but I wasn't seeing it myself.
Yeah, it's Norma's here saying all the Hobbes's choice submissions were counted as a single submission, as there were many thousands submitted by ACT, and they were also counted as a single submission.
See, that borders now on trust in government as well. So why are they being presented like that?
Yeah, I know. We need to actually put a highlighter through that. We've actually got that down, haven't we, as one of our topics.
Libby said corruption there. I mean, that's my thoughts exactly as well, Libby.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and talking about government and things getting cozy with the government, let's have a look at our next clip. This is actually from the recent Fourth Estate, which was hosted by my brother from another mother, Marty Gibson, and he had Annie O'Brien and Rachel Stewart last Friday, and they were talking about the entire Buske affair, and Annie said something sort of about 2/3 of the way through, which just absolutely astounded me. Take a listen to this.
Opposing forces within a society, and you just have to detonate them to get your revolution.
Well, we are having our cultural revolution. You can see that Chloe Swarbrick's got her little red book and she's charging around accusing everyone and expecting everyone to fall in line with what her and the youth have decided as the or have been told to decide is the way things should be. They hate the older generations because they're all bigoted or whatever it is that they say.
They haven't been educated properly.
Yeah, and so they are quite literally, you watch them, they are holding struggle sessions when they do. Even the press conference that she did, she is putting immense pressure on these journalists in a struggle session-like way of, this is how I expect you to report on this. She's telling them straight up. But what people don't realise, and I kind of, that there are relationships between politicians and journalists all the time, because they spend a lot of time in each other's spheres, and I mean that as in friendships and kind of professional relationships and and probably some of the others. And what Chloe has been very successful at with the young press gallery, she's established friendships with a lot of them. And one of the journalists who I think a lot of people would think is one of the more centre right ones, I remember him saying to me, if you need anything from Chloe, just let me know. She's a really good friend of mine. And I was like, well, actually, no, I don't want that kind of relationship with a politician, because you shouldn't have that kind of relationship, because you should be willing and able to challenge them in a way that is uncomfortable and that is not compatible with a friendship. And you could see it in that press conference the other day. The ones that I know don't know her as well, like the Sky News guy, he put her under pressure.
Yeah.
He said, something like, are you sure this is what, it's a bit of an assumption to say that all of the community feels like this or whatever. And, he's Australian and he's not been around as long. So I'm assuming that relationship's different. So he's put pressure on her there. But you see Jason Walls apologizing because he said the wrong pronouns. And it's she's able to control them because of these relationships that she has with them, and they don't want to upset their friend. And that is problematic.
That absolutely astounded me. I mean, it makes sense. Having been to Parliament and seen the tile run, which is basically there's this. If you've ever been to Parliament, it's on the first floor.
Yeah.
There's this little area there, and literally black and white tiles, and they come out from where they've got their offices, come across the centre to go to the house, and all the media are hovering around in that space. And when you look at most of these journalists now, they're kids, they're so young. But how, I mean, the trust, there's always been collegial relationships, but the media, part of their role has been to keep democracy in check.
One part of this, I wonder, Maree, is that it's like everything else in life, the way that they've sped everything up. People are a lot more busy these days and so on. And so they don't think as much. They're processing. If you've ever been to, say, for instance, I was at the New Zealand First Party conference last year, and they put a room outside the main room for the journalists to go and sit down and do their work. And these journalists are sitting there constantly typing, writing up their stories. They don't actually have much time to go and talk to someone or go and listen to what's actually being said. They're just sitting there typing away, editing away, and so on. And then when Winston Peters comes out to do a piece with the media, they rush over to this corner in front of the New Zealand First banner, and they ask their questions, and then they rush back to do it. And I think they've just become so reliant on the press release. They've become so reliant on just what they're being fed that they don't think anymore. And I think that it's something that we see all across society, right? It's not just journalists. None of us have any time to think anymore. But I think that to me is that's why I got into documentary filmmaking, because it requires you to actually think about something for a long period of time. And I'm not seeing that anymore.
No, and actually we've had a really classic example of that, haven't we, across this last sort of couple of weeks with the whole Buskegate affair, the curious tale of Benjamin Buske. And he, and the Greens put out a press release, Monday week ago, and literally all the media outlets just almost printed that press release verbatim without even posing a single question.
Going back to the COVID era, I always remember there was an independent journalist filming outside a place where they were injecting children on the first day of the children's vaccine being rolled out. And this independent journalist went up to a TV crew and started asking them, why aren't you asking the questions about the safety of these things? And the cameraman turned around to her and said, look, I'm sure if there's something wrong, there'll be a press release about it from the Ministry of Health. and that's the way that they think. They think that the Ministry of Health is going to write a press release saying, oh, this is really dangerous. No, they're not going to do that, mate. But that's the way they're doing their journalism. It's by press release.
Well, they're the ultimate mushrooms, aren't they? They're literally sitting there waiting for the shit in order that they need to survive to come down upon high from the government. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I remember when I first started in my first newsroom, I remember I'd go in, it was an afternoon paper in the Auckland area. And so I'd go in first thing in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and the fax machine would be running hot at that time. You would get one press release from the government, and you'd get one press release from the opposition on the same topic. And that's how the two sides, and I suppose when you wrote your story, I wasn't on the political beat, so I didn't write those stories, but I remember seeing them come in, and that's the way that, that people would get the two sides of the story, and then they'd write it up. But today, of course, the Public Interest Journalism Fund and all that other stuff means that they just take what they're given from the government itself.
Yeah.
Or from the left-leaning side.
It was quite interesting because Annie had written an opinion piece which she'd actually referenced during that Fourth Estate show, and it actually dropped just around the same time actually that Fourth Estate show came out in the New Zealand Herald, and it was very good. Her sort of views on it, and particularly being a lesbian woman. Well, there was such a furore about Annie's piece being in the Herald that the Herald's response to this was probably to go to the most extreme left-wing activist that they could find in order to write a counter piece.
Yeah, well...
Hey, at least we can say that they covered both sides.
I suppose so. But, you go back to the Benjamin Doyle thing, and... they bend over backwards to make sure that they're fair on his side or the Green Party side. But, look at some of the stuff that came out of their mouths. Look at, for instance, just one thing, look at the Instagram handle, Bible Belt Buske. He talked all about how offensive it was for us to all be talking about what the word bussy meant, because, of course, we couldn't possibly know because we're not gay or lesbian or whatever it is that is supposed to be the group that knows what that means. Well, Bible Belt Buske, I find that extremely offensive. He's linking the Bible to boys' anuses. That's extremely offensive.
Yeah, it is.
So if we're going to be balancing things, then I think the media does start to, if they want to survive, they're going to need to learn again how to balance these things again. That's not to say that his views can't be aired. It just means that they need to start balancing them better.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump slightly out of order now because we brought this up. Is that there was actually another news story, and I did a commentary that was in the Daily Brief that went out, I think today's Daily Brief, and that was around the fact that we had. They had that story, the Bible about Buske story, and then next minute we have Mikey Sherman door-stopping, pouncing on this poor MP Hamish Campbell outside Parliament a couple of days ago in this one news story. And for starters, I had no idea who Hamish Campbell was. I mean, I was just thinking, have we even heard of him? And poor old Hamish, he is the MP for Ilam, and quiet conservative Christian chap, and here is there's the headline: National MP part of secretive religious sect. I mean, could you get any more Dan Brown than that? Here we go.
Let me get this straight, Maree.
Yeah.
They haven't found this secret religious sect to have actually done anything yet. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. Here we go. He's part of a religious group embroiled in alleged child abuse being investigated in New Zealand, Australia, and the USA. So it's not to say that he's part of it. He just happens to be part of the same church. And as we know, these churches, if it's in New Zealand, Australia, and the United States, I mean, it must be of a size. So guilt by association.
I don't think that this would have been a story unless if the Bible Belt Buske story wasn't a story, this story would never have come up, would it?
No.
This is them looking. It's a witch hunt looking for a balance to the other one.
Absolutely. This is like, no, we're not just focusing on this group. We're looking at every group, every possibility that there could be, a whiff of abuse. But on the basis of, this poor chap that, I mean, honestly, in the chat, hands up. I guess if you live in Christchurch, you might know him. But if you're outside of Christchurch, I mean, he hides. I mean, he's not been in the media cycles. You don't hear about this Hamish Campbell. No one knows really who he is. A diversion. Yeah, Shudi-Ann's just saying it's the means of a diversion. You're right. It's exactly what it is. And I mean, on that metric that, they're chasing him because he happens to belong to a church that there could be allegations of abuse. Well, you may as well round up all the Catholics, Anglicans and Presbyterians under that metric, and sort of shake out if there's some sort of abuse or something in those closets. I mean, it's just lazy journalism.
You could probably also go and investigate the little squiggly line.
Well, a Koru, according to our friend.
Sorry, the Koru.
Yeah, according to our friend Benjamin. It is. Yeah, it is just. I guess it's really disappointing because you would think that they would have other things to concentrate on. And I said in my little piece, if you're looking for stories to concentrate on, why don't you look at stories such as the continued abuse in state care and the story that I did with Melissa Davies and her family? Still nothing happening for them. What about Alan House from Culture Shift New Zealand and all the bullying and things that are going on there? They pick and choose these stories, and it was obviously as a way to deflect from what was going on with the whole Buskegate saga.
I think too, you touch on a really good point there, Maree, that I've said a number of times on RCR 360. It's amazing all of these stories that we have open to us, which the mainstream media just don't want to touch at all. No. I've gone through it with my documentaries for RCR as well, like the fluoride one and the managed retreat one. These are stories which they're huge stories that affect hundreds of thousands, if not millions of New Zealanders, but the mainstream media just won't touch them. I feel like we're kind of like unicorns, we're able to talk about these stories and they just won't.
No, they won't. Actually, another one that should have been talked about more, and I was stunned that it hasn't. It cropped up a couple of Sundays ago. This is a clip that we've got, and my mind is still blown. I've only just gone and taken a very short clip from it, and it was the Helen Clark Foundation. There was a report that Shamabeel Jacob, who is a economist, and they pulled together some questions in regards to around democracy in New Zealand and the social cohesion of what is going on in our society in New Zealand. And this one question popped up in that interview, and my blood ran cold.
Almost a third of New Zealanders like the idea of an authoritarian leader who doesn't have to worry about parliament or elections. That's the new finding of a report into social cohesion published by the Helen Clark Foundation. So I want to talk about democracy first of all. 81% of respondents in your survey said that democracy is good for running the country. But when you frame the question a slightly different way, it had a fascinating response. Have a look at this. You asked, would having a strong leader who does not have to bother with parliament and elections be a good way to govern New Zealand? 32% of people said it would be a good way to govern New Zealand. But here's the thing, 48% of men under the age of 44 think it would be good.
Yeah. The glee when Jack opened it up. Over 30% of New Zealanders would be happy.
It's terrifying, Maree.
And
I feel like we're being primed for it. I recently read a very similar story about a very similar survey that was done for the World Economic Forum, and they talk along the same lines. I feel like they've been creating as much chaos as they possibly can through COVID, through all the different ideology things like Black Lives Matter, the transgender ideology stuff. All of this stuff is just primed to create complete chaos so that, we will clamor for the authoritarian leader, and then they start asking loaded questions like that one. What on earth is Helen Clark asking questions like that? That's a question which goes directly against democracy. Yeah. Why is her foundation even asking that question? Why would it even be on her radar? I don't get that.
No.
unless you start to understand that we are in a war, and the war is not about territory anymore. The war is about people, and we are the territory ourselves. That's what it's all about, and it's just creating chaos. And then they're starting to put ideas like that in front of people, and Jack Tame's smiling about it.
Oh, I'm just looking. I'm just seeing if I've still got it in here. I haven't got it in here. There were the 4 steps, the Yuri Brezhnev's 4 steps, and which in terms of indoctrinating a population. And the first one was demoralization.
Yeah.
The second one was destabilization. I can't remember the third one. I think the third one was something along the lines of fear. And then the last one is normalization. And dare I say it, we're at normalization, and we've been there for a while, and it is quite terrifying. And Joe in the chat is just saying, yeah, definitely desensitizing us. They are desensitizing us.
Yeah, and look, Mike in the chat, he goes, every time they spout this crap, they are putting it in the minds of those who can't think critically. Yeah, it's making it so that it's in the common knowledge realm, I suppose. And I hear it from my neighbors in the area where I live. Every now and then, like this is a slight deviation from the topic, but it's the same concept. We were standing around talking. We were at one of the neighbors' houses recently, and someone said they were talking about cancer, and someone said, "Oh, won't it be great when those mRNA shots can cure cancer? We'll just be able to have a shot to get rid of cancer." And I just wanted to scream at him, it's the shots that are causing the cancer. But it's been put into common knowledge throughout society that these things can be done with one shot. You can cure everything. And it's the same thing that we're talking about here, right? They're just putting these ideas into people's heads and letting them run with it.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And some great comments here. Nikki was just saying they're taking the guns away too. They're tightening up on all those gun laws. And then the mass psychosis theory, which of course Matthias Desmet's Psychology of Totalitarianism. If you've not read that fantastic book. Oh, said stage 3 is crisis. Thank you. I knew it was there somewhere. And then Libby Hooton is just saying, if you read The Indoctrinated Brain, I have read it, Libby. It's really quite scary, and it talks about manipulation, the psychological manipulation. And in that book, and she's saying here, it's a jab, it attacks the hippocampus and the ability to think and remember. And the indoctrinated brain, where it differs from the psychology of totalitarianism, which talks about a lot of the mechanisms that David Charalambous talked about in the interview that we did in terms of the psychological training that we have. The indoctrinated brain actually talks about some of the biochemical triggers that we have that actually make us more compliant and susceptible to bad ideas. No, it is definitely quite concerning. Now, one question that I have, and I saw it scoot past the chat a while ago, and somebody was asking, when are we going to have these documentaries on YouTube? And that is definitely a work in progress. I know Alistair and I have been working and talking to the team about getting those up. But here's a question for you guys. Where would you like to see and have these so it makes it easier for you to listen, or easier for you to share with people that you know where they would access it, or what are the things that are preventing you from sharing this content? So I know there's 3 questions here. Fire away. There we go. Norma's just saying Rumble is the only place where they won't be censored. Putting documentaries on YouTube and Rumble will increase reach. Thanks, Peter. Rumble. Well, there we go.
One of the criticisms I always hear about Rumble is that people don't want to share Rumble because they've been taught to think of Rumble as a conspiracy theorist network or something like that. So I mean, I know I've been using Rumble ever since the days of COVID, when we weren't allowed to put any of our documentaries like We Came Here for Freedom on YouTube.
Yeah, actually, Joe said one Equit News for the normies, please. Do you know what Marty said to me on Media Matters this morning? He said to me, he said, we should get these out, and you should see if we can get them on TVNZ.
I'm sorry. What?
I know. Well, it definitely managed out. Why not?
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, we could try. I suppose we could submit, couldn't we?
Couldn't we?
I used to have the email for the submissions lady at TVNZ. I wonder if I
Why
could find
not?
it again.
That's a good idea, Joe. Thank you for that. YouTube and Rumble. Yeah. Yeah. Josie's pipe dream. Hey, think big, Joe. Let's shoot for the stars, mate. You never know, we might hit the moon.
Well, when they reject it, we could have a press release of our own talking about how they rejected it. The New Zealand funded story.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. So talking about managed out, what's sort of coming up? I mean, because I know that you've got so much footage.
Yeah. Look, this story is too big for one documentary, I think. I think what we're probably going to find is that I'll probably put out some small short ones to complement the main documentary. There are stories all around New Zealand. There's what's happening in Port Waikato. There's what's happening down in the deep south at Blue Cliffs near Invercargill there, that Jaspreet Boparai was telling me all about that. There's what's happening at Wairoa. There are so many different stories going on all around New Zealand, and New Zealanders, the people that are there, think that they're all alone. It's only happening to them, but it's actually it's happening all over New Zealand, and they're all the same story happening again and again and again. So what we're probably going to do is start putting out some small, maybe 10-minute pieces on different areas around New Zealand. If any of our listeners here tonight have a story about this happening, the managed retreat story happening in their area, get in touch, let us know so we can tell your story as well, perhaps. The other thing that we're going to possibly do is do a few screenings around New Zealand. And so if you think your community needs to know about this, that there's a whole lot of asleep people, we can come down and perhaps do a screening in your area. Just let us know if you think that it'd be worthwhile us coming down. And we can try and do that as well. And then, of course, there's also the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor. There's some really good stuff that did not make it into the film. And so hopefully we can do an RCR 360 show utilizing some of those interviews as well.
Yeah, it would be. I think it's just going to be so valuable. So, yeah, and if you want to share any of that stuff too, or inbox at realitycheck.radio. I mean, obviously, we've got all the chat coming through there, and the team are actually capturing all of that. But inbox at realitycheck.radio is definitely the place to send it to us, so we can have a look. And gosh, it's just the chat's absolutely flying by now. Anne is saying, "Is this happening away from the coasts?" Yes, Anne. This is a short answer to that.
That's exactly what I just wanted to bring up there, actually, Maree. Is that everyone just remember this is not just a coastline story. That's the way that they're framing it at the moment. But underneath it all, what it is they're changing the law so that they can take people's land titles from them. They can move you off your land. They can coerce you off your land. This won't just be for coastal areas of New Zealand. This will be, say, for instance, you might be in a geothermal area or an earthquake zone or a flooding zone or something. You know, this can be used, this law, if it passes, could be used to move anyone in New Zealand off their land. So it's not just for people who are living on the coast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you opened Managed Out with those images from Hawke's Bay, from here in the Esk Valley. And I mean, the Esk Valley is several kilometres from the coast. So that just sort of shows you what that can happen, definitely. Yes. So the big thing that we need you to do, as Alistair said, lots of shorts are coming together. But the number one thing that you could do for us is share. We can't emphasize this enough. We're working really hard to make sure we get more shorts out, more things on social media, as well as thank you very much, very, very much for the suggestions for YouTube and all the rest of it. Sian and the team behind the scenes are collating all of those now, because that means that we're going to put these in places so you can share them to other people so they can actually see this information, because it is so important. And if you go down to the page, actually, Alistair, can you pop up just quickly? I know I'm just very mindful of time, but if you can pop up the rcr.media page for us, and it's our page also mirrors the app, so they should both look the same. Now, I know
It's coming.
naughty.
It's coming.
It's coming. I know I'm a bit naughty. Sorry. That if you can actually share that, we've actually broken it down. We've got entire episodes, but we've also got clips. So if you need to find it, we've got the main one that's just there. But I personally find if you scroll down, Alistair is just going to scroll down for you to where it says RCR 360 here, view all. This is where I go to do all my sharing, because this lists every single episode. It lists every single interview. And this is a great one to share, because there might be, depending on who you're wanting to share with, you might think, they may not cope with the entire interview, or might find that a bit challenging, but I know that they'll love listening to this interview. So however you want to package it up or do your bite-sized bits of information, this is the way to do it. So if you are actually able to do that, Mike's saying clips are the best for sharing. The clips are great. And the team have been working so hard to get more and more clips out for you. To help do the sharing. So yes, if you could definitely do the share, that's great. And of course, so many of you here are Foundation members. Thank you so much for your support very much. We couldn't do this without you guys. And of course, the more you share, the more people get pulled into the RCR community, and hopefully we can get more people continuing to donate as well. So Alistair can do some of the most amazing things that you want to do. Someone did ask about New Zealand On Air funding, Alistair, if you thought, have you got...
I
knew that would make you laugh.
The Public Interest Journalism Fund too. Shall I try for that?
Yeah. There you go. Hey, look, I've just had a look at time, and thank you so much, everybody, today. For all your comments there. Man, that chat was moving so fast there in places, and we really do appreciate all your feedback. We're going to be doing some more of these, so do look out. So when you see an RCR Unplugged, this is the format that we'll be in. It's just going to be a nice, relaxed show. Be lots of fun. Any thoughts from you on these sort of, particularly around democracy, trust in media and digital manipulation, and what's sort of happening, Alistair, moving forward, where we're going, what we're up to?
I just think that what we're going through, I think I sort of mentioned it earlier. I think what we're going through is a reconfiguration of our information systems. The mainstream media has lost its relevancy, and that's why we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing, because we're trying to fill a void. And it's all about freedom of speech, and it's all about speaking our mind. And I've noticed a few of the chats there on a couple of comments on what I've said here tonight. We are listening, and that's why we're doing this kind of format as well, so that we can talk a lot more to the people that are watching us and listening to us. And that's what democracy and freedom and media needs these days. And that's what we're trying to do, right? Fill that gap.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you everyone again for joining us again this evening. Of course, this is the fantastic Alistair Harding who does all the hard work. I'm just the wing woman along for the ride. But
the incredible Maree Buske.
Thank you. But we love the fact that you guys have coming along with us. And as I said, share. We definitely need that. We need to get more people consuming this fantastic content, because it really is amazing. And remember, if there's anything that you want to share with us, particularly around if you're having struggle sharing, and if you're having some trouble, you're not quite sure how it works, or you need some help, flick a note through to the inbox team, inbox@realitycheck.radio, or 2057 is the text, or actually refer back to when the website started. Alia and I did actually a couple of website sessions, and we did talk about how to go through and do some sharing there. That might be quite useful for you as well. But hey, look, I just want to thank you, Alistair. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This has been RCR Unplugged, RCR 360 Unplugged here. And we will see you again very soon. Watch out, keep an eye out for those inboxes. Take care. Bye, guys.